Jesus, name above all names.
It was a bright, sunny Sunday morning, lovely weather by all reports, like today, when an 18-year-old Walter Young marched up the aisle of his village church with 14 of his friends. This was 1914, and he and his pals were recruited to their regiment to do their service for their country. And the vicar gave them each a New Testament, rather like the Gideon ones given out today. And he said to each of the 18-year-olds, "Take it with you, let it be your guide." And they proudly tucked it in their pockets and off they marched. A proud day for them and the village. They didn't know what the horror of the trenches was going to be like until they reached it. And they were inexperienced 18-year-olds. And partly probably because of their inexperience, they were some of the very first ones to be captured by the Germans from their trench. Their sergeant said, "Lay down your arms," and Walter Young hadn't expected to be captured. He thought he might be injured. He thought he might see some fighting, but in the first weeks he was captured. And he was marched off with his group of friends behind German lines. And then the horror started, because he was marched with his friends through Germany to Poland. Day after day they endured the ever colder days, marching and marching and marching, till eventually they reached an area famous for mining. Little did he know where he was or what he was going to do, but the next morning after arrival they were marched down the mines. And for days and weeks and months they had to work hard manual work down the coal mines, supplying the coal that was needed to support the German war effort. And as a prisoner he had a tough time, and so did his pals. They were housed in a very bleak prison camp just at the edge of the mine, and every day at 6 o'clock in the morning they were marched off to work in the mines 6 days a week. Cold, bitter, hard manual work. Not what he envisaged at all when he went off to fight. Eventually, after a seemingly an eternity, 6 days mining and 1 day rest, they gathered, this small group, and said, well, this is our 1 day of rest, the Sunday where they didn't have to work. They were exhausted, but they said, shall we tell each other stories? And Walter reached inside his pocket and reached out his New Testament that he'd been given months and months ago. And he read a story that he'd learnt from his Sunday school, a story of Jesus performing miracles. And then next week he read one of the Psalms, and the week after he talked about another story, one of the miracles that Jesus performed, and one of the parables. And he found very quickly that week after week his own comrades in arms were listening to him as he read and retold the stories that he knew and had learnt at Sunday school. And after a few weeks, someone said, well, shall we sing a hymn? And a week later, they started to say some prayers. And so a small service started each Sunday morning in the prison camp, led by Walter and his little book, the little book of words that the vicar had given him. A word of these little services spread, and before long the whole prison camp was attending a Sunday morning service led by Walter, and even some of the prison guards joined in, singing the hymns that they knew, obviously in German. Eventually the war came to a halt. In November 1918 the surrender was signed. But it wasn't until 6 months later that Walter managed to get back to his little village, 6 months after the armistice. And it was a similar warm, sunny Sunday morning when he and the only 8 now of his pals, his comrades, walked down the centre of the church to give thanks for having survived the First World War. Their journey home had taken 6 months, and on the spring day in 1919, the 8 that were 15 gave thanks that they'd survived. Many had wounds, both physical and mental, from the horrors of the war. But Walter handed back to the vicar his New Testament and Psalms, and the vicar gave him a new one. The old tatty one that had been careworn and covered in dust and coal soot, the vicar kept, and he gave him a brand new one to continue his work. The little book of words, as he called it, had sustained him throughout the war and sustained others. It had kept hope alive in their prison camp. In our dark days now, the little book of words can sustain us and give us hope in our dark days. Thank you.